The Combat Integration Academy of Valethar Station sat at the edge of the neutral corridor, a spinning ring of metal and politics suspended between 7 star systems. It trained soldiers, diplomats, and enforcers from dozens of species. Most cadets were from civilized, equilibrium worlds, planets where the air was thin, the gravity cooperative, and the evolutionary pressures polite. Mara Ellison was not from any of those places. She was from Earth. Instructor Kale Veyron had been teaching combat theory and applied disarmament for 31 standard cycles. He had trained Valorians, whose triple-jointed limbs gave them absurd reach. He had trained Drath soldiers, who could see heat signatures through walls. He had even once, memorably, trained a Gorvian, a species that communicated exclusively through precise patterns of bioluminescence and whose concept of threatening posture required a separate vocabulary to describe. He had never trained a human. He had been told they were soft, fragile, short-lived. Their homeworld was technically classified as a Deathworld in the Interstellar Biological Registry, Class 4, which meant it actively tried to kill things that lived on it, but Kale had assumed that was an exaggeration. Bureaucrats loved dramatic classifications. It made the forms feel more important. He had reviewed Cadet Ellison's file before her first session. She was 23 years old by human reckoning. Medium build. No obvious augmentations. No external armor plating. No venom sacs, reinforced skeletal structure, or secondary respiratory systems. She had brown eyes and dark hair pulled back in a practical knot, and according to her intake assessment, her resting heart rate was 51 beats per minute. 51, he'd thought. That's almost meditative. He did not yet understand what that meant. The first 2 weeks of class, Mara sat in the back row and said almost nothing. Kale noticed she watched everything. Not in the way that nervous cadets watched, scanning for threat or approval, but in the way that something patient watches. Cataloging. Measuring. Her eyes moved across his demonstrations with a quality he couldn't name at first. Then he placed it, assessment. She was assessing him. He found it mildly irritating. She had barely passed the theoretical module on Valorian grappling forms. She had submitted her written analysis of joint lock mechanics 3 days late. When he had paired cadets for sparring practice, she had been slow, clumsy-looking, and had lost both her bouts, though, he noticed, she had never actually fallen. Just stepped back. Redirected. Absorbed. He had marked her progress as insufficient. On the 15th day, he lost his patience. The exercise was simple, a disarmament drill against a training blade. Kale used a blunted ceremonial Valethari dagger, a long, curved thing, to demonstrate proper grip break technique. One by one, cadets attempted to replicate the motion. Most managed it adequately. A few failed. Mara failed 4 times in a row. Each time, Kale reset the position and corrected her. Each time, she nodded. Each time, she attempted the movement, and each time, she did something almost right, something that was technically correct in sequence but wrong in quality, as though she were following instructions in a language she'd translated but never spoken aloud. Cadet Ellison. His voice carried the particular flatness that senior instructors used to signal diminishing patience. Again. She stepped forward. Set her grip. Began the motion. And fumbled it. Again. Kale did not strike students. That was not the Academy's way. But what he did, what he had done 31 cycles, what every instructor in the tradition did, was apply corrective contact. A sharp strike to the forearm to demonstrate improper tension. A blow to the shoulder to indicate failed alignment. Physical feedback, quick and precise, that told the body what words had failed to convey. He struck her on the forearm. Hard enough to matter. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She looked at the point of impact with what appeared to be mild curiosity, the way someone might look at an unexpected stain on their sleeve. Something cold moved through Kale's chest. Not quite fear. Not yet. Again, he said. She set her grip. What happened next lasted approximately 2 seconds. Those 2 seconds would be discussed, dissected, and eventually incorporated into academy training materials under the heading Deathworld Physiology, Applied Implications for Combat Instructors. Mara did not perform the grip break technique. She performed something else entirely, something that used the technique as a starting motion and then departed from it so violently and so precisely that Kale's training brain spent a full half-second trying to classify what category of response it fell into. Her left hand trapped the blade at the crossguard. Not grabbed, trapped, the way a vice closes, the way a thing with no give and no hesitation closes. Her right hand came up and hit his wrist not at the pressure point he taught, but at the joint itself, at the exact angle that human biomechanics, apparently, suddenly, with great emphasis, allowed for a force output that exceeded what his calculations said that arm should produce. The dagger left his hand. It didn't clatter. It spun, caught by her left hand before it had completed half a rotation, reversed, and was pointed back at him, blunt end forward, a gesture that was technically courteous and practically devastating. The entire room was silent. Kale looked at the blade. He looked at her hand. He looked at her face, which held an expression he was still not sure how to read, not triumph, not aggression, not even satisfaction. Just the same quiet attention that had been there since day one. Patient. Awake. Done watching. I've been doing it wrong on purpose, she said. Her voice was calm. Conversational. I needed to understand how you responded to failure before I showed you what I actually knew. I didn't know yet if this place used pain as correction. A long pause. It does, she said. So I needed to know if you'd escalate. Whether that strike was standard or personal. Whether I was being assessed or targeted. She set the dagger on the mat between them. It was standard. So. Now we can proceed. Kale Veyron later wrote, in his official observation notes, that Cadet Mara Ellison had demonstrated unconventional strategic methodology with exceptional motor execution. It was the most careful sentence he had ever written. What he did not write, what he told only his colleague instructor Drave, over a drink in the faculty lounge, was what he'd actually felt in that half-second when his weapon left his hand. I didn't see her move, he said. I was watching her. I am trained to watch. And I didn't see her move. Drave clicked his mandibles in the pattern that meant unsurprised. Earth classification? Class 4 Deathworld. A pause. You know what Class 4 means, yes? The organisms that survive on Class 4 planets don't develop strength because they're strong. They develop it because every generation that wasn't strong enough didn't survive long enough to have the next one. Kale considered that. She's been here 2 weeks, he said. She was watching me for 2 weeks. Of course she was. Drave finished his drink. Humans don't assess threats once. They assess them continuously. They're pattern recognition animals shaped by a planet that tried to kill them for 100,000 years. A pause. The question isn't why she disarmed you. The question is why you assumed she couldn't. Mara Ellison graduated top of her class. In her final evaluation, the review panel noted that she had an unusual tendency to appear outclassed until, suddenly, she wasn't. Several instructors flagged this as deceptive methodology. One filed it as a behavioral concern. Instructor Kale Veyron filed it as the highest commendation his rubric allowed. He had added one line to his personal teaching notes, in the margin, in small script. If a human looks like they're struggling to learn, assume they're learning something else.